few announcements. Let's push our family meeting, church family meeting, congregational meeting to next Sunday. I think that would be better. And fellowship for both the adults and the youth are going to reconvene this Friday at 7:30 p.m. So please note that. And if you would like to serve by giving or donating, there is the information as to how you can do so. Let's open our Bibles to the book of Philippians, as we just started from this book a few weeks ago. Philippians chapter 1, verse 3 to 6. Kind of moving a little gingerly here because every Friday I go play pickup ball with my son at the gym and threw out my back. And so I might just be stuck like a robot here today. All right. Philippians chapter 1, verse 3 to 6. I thank my God in all my remembrance of you, always in every prayer of mine for you all, making my prayer with joy, because of your partnership in the gospel from the very first day until now. Verse 6, and I am sure of this, that he who began a good work in you will bring it to completion at the day of Jesus Christ. Dear God, we thank you for your word, and we now ask you to bless this time we have in your word. Your word is powerful to create faith. Your word is powerful to grant repentance and to renew our faith in you. And that's what you want from us ultimately, to live by faith. That all our choices, all our decisions, every path we take, in all that we do, work, parenting, whatever it is, being a child, being a son, a daughter, husband, wife, a neighbor, you want us to do all that we do as a result of faith, not in place of faith. And I pray that you would create that in our hearts today. We pray all this in your name. Amen. You know, I read an article this week. It's from Rosie's alma mater, Berkeley, and these two psychologists wrote this article entitled How Gratitude Changes You and Your Brain. Gratitude, how it changes you and your brain. And that the exercise of gratitude, and I mean real, meaningful, not this passing, God, thank you for this meal, and we're not even, right, we're eating and we're not thankful, right? And I would bet my money that if, most of us probably don't express or exercise meaningful, intentional gratitude, though God calls us to it for our good. And even in this article, it's not Christian, obviously. They talk about how the exercise of meaningful, intentional gratitude is not very taxing at all, but it yields high results. Again, it's the practice of gratitude. And they talk about how many studies for decades now, have found that people who consciously, intentionally count their blessings, they tend to be happier and less depressed, more content and less anxious, more joyful and less displeased, more grateful and less complaining and comparing. So what they did is they had a randomized study, and they divided this group into 3 different groups. Group number 1, they told them, it's a randomized study, they told them to once a week write a letter to somebody and write out what you're grateful for. What are you grateful and thankful for? And they did it for 3 weeks. At least once a week, do this for 3 weeks. Group number 2, they had him write a letter to another individual, but they only had him write about what distresses them, What annoys them, what bothers them, their deepest discouraging thoughts, their negative experiences. Only write that out and give it to another. And the third group did nothing. Don't write anything. And what the result was that the group who wrote that gratitude letter at least once a week to another person for 3 weeks reported significantly better mental health and wellness. Even after 4 weeks that their trial was done, and even after 12 weeks, right? Even after 12 weeks of writing once a week about what they're grateful for. The study is going to show that meaningful, conscious attitude of gratitude is good for the soul. It's good for the heart. It'll make you a better person. It'll make you a more joyful person. It'll make you a person that other people actually enjoy being around. It'll take stress off of your life. It'll reduce your anxiety. And they go on and talk about how gratitude unshackles us from toxic emotions. Because when you are thinking about intentionally what you are grateful for, the blessings you have, and we're not disregarding the hardships and what we lack, but if you're intentionally focusing on, thinking about, dwelling on all that is good in your life, it makes it considerably harder for you to ruminate and meditate on your negative experiences. You know the saying, you may have heard of it before years, I think it was Luther who said it, you cannot stop a bird from flying over your head, but you can stop that bird from building a nest on your head. You know what that means? You can't stop thoughts from coming. You can't stop negative thoughts and hurtful emotions and bitterness and anger and jealousy and all these things. Wanting to lash out, anger. You can't stop these things from coming. You can't stop a bird from flying over your head, but you can stop it from building a nest. I mean, you don't have to dwell on these thoughts. You don't have to focus on it, meditate on it, feed it, strengthen it, and cultivate that monster. You could let it be there. Let it bother you. Let it annoy you. Let it hurt you. Let it trouble you. Let it distract you. But you are intentionally thinking about dwelling on and focusing on what is good, what is right, what is worthy, what is beautiful, what is worthwhile. They talk about how gratitude helps even if you don't share it with anybody. Just between you and the Lord, or just even for yourself. Gratitude takes time. It will not change you immediately. And you guys and I are so impatient, right? We're impatient Americans. Doesn't work, we don't try. But the most important things in life take time. Right? If this past Thanksgiving you went out and had fast food, well, you got it like that, and you got fast food. But you didn't get quality meal. Important things in life take time. Maturation takes time. Becoming a person who thinks as God wants us to think. The renewal of the mind takes time. It's more of a snowball effect, cumulative effect, and we have to accept the fact that, okay, gotta wait, gotta be patient, gotta be at it, gotta work at it. It doesn't kick in immediately, but it will kick in over time. And this article goes on and says that gratitude has lasting effects on the brain. You guys ever heard of, right, years ago they said the adult brain is not malleable. It gets stuck at the age of 12, 13, or 16 and you're done. What you have, and that's it. You're screwed. That was what they were conveying to us. No, the brain is malleable. You guys ever heard the saying? The neurons that fire together, they what? No one's heard it? Wire together. The neurons that fire together, wire together. So if you're always thinking dark thoughts, negative thoughts, depressive thoughts, do not be surprised if 2, 4, 6, 8, 9, 10 months later you're more negative, more dark, and more depressed. The neurons that fire together, they wire together. It requires work, not just work. Driven by faith, as I hope to show you today. Because God didn't give us a brain that will be stuck at a particular age. That's what the Bible speaks about, the renewal of the mind. To not give up. Renewal of the mind. The neurons that fire together, they wire together. It changes the heart. It renews the soul. We are a whole being. Right? If you, right now, were paralyzed from neck down, you probably won't have a great time worshiping. It will take time for you to acclimate and to think positively, right? My point is, the physical affects the soul affects the mind affects the body. We are we're an intertwined being. You know what I'm saying? That's why you can't just love God with just all your heart, or just all your body, it's the whole thing. The neurons that fire together, they will wire together. It will renew the mind, it will renew the soul. God has created us in that way. At the end of the article, it says, much of our time and energy is spent pursuing things we currently don't have. Isn't that the world we're living in? We are consumed. We waste our time. We use our energy thinking about, worrying about what we don't have. Advertisements. All the advertisements. They're all creating a need. They're all creating a need. That's not a need. Gratitude reverses our priorities to help us appreciate the people and the things we do have. An attitude of gratitude is what I'm talking about. And an attitude of gratitude is powerful. It is effective. Maybe not immediately, but cumulatively. Slowly but surely. And it's available for anyone and everyone, believer or not, as part of God's common grace. He causes the sun to rise on the evil and the good. He sends rain on the just and the unjust. There are resources that God has given to the world for them to access so they can enjoy life. That's gratitude. But an attitude of gratitude is even more powerful. It is even more effective and is available for anyone and everyone that is united to Christ by faith as part of God's special grace. Special grace. What I mean by that is we as believers have access to resources, things to be grateful for. Things to be everlastingly grateful for. The world can only be thankful for things that will last as long as they live. You and I can be thankful for that will exist and be with us even after we die and go to be with the Lord in the new heavens and the new earth. We have resources, comforting, washing, justifying, right? Conscience cleansing, joy giving, hope producing resources that the world does not have. So for an example, in Philippians chapter 4 verse 8, it says, finally brothers, whatever is true, whatever is honorable, whatever is just, whatever is pure, whatever is lovely, whatever is commendable, if there's any excellence, if there's anything worthy of praise, if there's anything worthy of praise, what's the command? Think. The word means ponder. Don't just live. Think and live. Think about these things. He's saying only you believers have access to this. And to not access it is to your loss. What you have learned and received and heard and seen in me. Paul says, practice these things. And what's the promise? The God of peace will be with you. Well, isn't God of peace already with me? Yes, Paul is speaking experientially here. Paul is saying the reason why you do not experience the peace of God, the reason why your heartbeat is always high, the reason why you're nervous and sweating and worried, and the reason why you're troubled, The reason why you have no peace, part of it, a large part of it, is because you're not thinking as you're living. You're thinking about needs. You're not thinking about promises. This is not positive thinking Christianity. This is promise thinking Christianity. That's what Paul is saying. Remember all the promises of God. Remember the past promises. Remember the present and the future promises. Live thinking about these things. Live claiming these things. But let's be honest, I'm with you, right? We get disappointed. We get discouraged. We get disheartened. It doesn't take much for me to become discouraged and disheartened. All it takes is annual car registration renewal. Like what? Right? Insurance. What? I'm leaving California, but I can't, right? In all seriousness, we get disappointed, we get discouraged, we get disheartened because of difficulties, because of what we lack, because of our failures, our sins, our besetting sins, our struggles, work, marriage, child rearing, family issues, all kinds of stuff. And so we, without even trying, have developed this attitude of ingratitude. Ingratitude. And that's not good for us. It's not good to fill our hearts with toxic emotions. It's not good to live in darkness and negativity. It's just not good for you. I would even say, even if you don't do it for, how dare you say this? Even if you don't do it for God's glory, I would say for your own goodness and wellness and sanity, express and exercise gratitude. But of course, we want more than that, right? It is not good for you. And I understand, right? We as humans, how can we not be negative? How can we not be jaded? How can we not complain? Somebody's always better than us. Somebody always has more than us. I'm failing. I'm struggling. And on it goes. But that is no way to live. That's not God's will for us. That's not what God calls us to. It is the opposite of what God promises us. And the promise is the God of peace will be with you. And so when I am not living in peace, when I am not experiencing peace, whether it be within or with my neighbor, clearly something is way out of whack. Something is out of whack. Philippians chapter 1 verse 3 to 6 teaches us that we can still live with an attitude of gratitude. We can still live with an attitude of gratitude. And I'm going to say right now, it will require work. By work, I mean the work of faith. It will require the fight of faith to live with an attitude of gratitude. Thanksgiving. That will be God glorifying. Whether you eat or drink, whatever you do all to the glory of God, right? So, again, like I said earlier, just for your sanity, even if you don't do it for God's glory, for your heart, for your wellness, for your mental, emotional health, express and live in gratitude. But we want more than that. We are called to do it all for the glory of God. God is pleased when we remember the promises of God and live in meaningful, purposeful gratitude. Again, and even like the author said, it's not a taxing exercise. It's just, it yields high results. You can do this in the car, in the bathroom, in the shower. You can do this anywhere, everywhere. Before you sleep, when you wake up, when you're getting ready, you can do this literally anywhere. Not only is it God glorifying, Thanksgiving, that is people pleasing. And by people pleasing, I don't mean it in a sinful way, like Galatians chapter 1:10 says, right? Paul says, am I here to get man's approval? No, I'm not here to please man as in to get man's approval. It's not about that. But people pleasing. In the 1 Corinthians 10:33 sense, Paul says, I seek to please everyone. Not to get man's approval, but to win them to Christ. I seek to please everyone, to advance them. That kind of people pleasing. where you are living in gratitude and you are actually an encouragement. You are an encouragement to be around. An attitude of gratitude, thanksgiving, that is worry weakening. Philippians 4:6, do not be anxious about anything, but in everything, by prayer and supplication, with thanksgiving, let your requests be made known to God, and the peace of God, there we go again, which surpasses all understanding, will guard your hearts and your minds in Christ Jesus. People think this is some kind of a subjective experience. Okay, God, I'm anxious. Help me, help me, help me. Oh, I feel peace about this decision. So that's not what Paul's talking about. That is subjective. You don't need Jesus for that. Paul is talking about in the midst of your anxiety, he says, pray and seek and cry out to God. But what is the secret? It's thanksgiving. Because again, when you are thinking about things you and I can be thankful for amid all the hardships and the stresses of life, it causes us to turn our gaze away from the negativity and the darkness to the goodness and the blessings and the promises of God. Again, you can't stop a bird from flying over your head, but you can stop it from letting it build a nest on your head. Again, those dark thoughts, negativity things will come, negative things will come. But we are, by faith, exercising thanksgiving, and Paul promises it. What you will experience as a result of it is what? God's abiding, faithful, hope-giving peace. This is a matter of the heart. It's a matter of the mind. And this is also thanksgiving that is worthwhile for our wellness. Paul later on says, I learned the art of contentment. I am in prison epistle. I am in prison for preaching the gospel. If anyone should be blessed, it's me, right? But I am in prison. But he says, I learned it. It required work, faith, the fight of faith. And I learned the art of contentment even behind these, what do you call those metal, what is it? You know what I'm saying. You know what I'm saying, right? And let me also say this. An attitude of gratitude that leads to being witnesses to the watching world. Being witnesses to the watching world. Like Paul, what if we too can say, I learned the art of contentment. It doesn't mean I don't get discouraged. It doesn't mean I don't get anxious. Paul even says earlier on in chapter 2, he says, I am more eager to send him, Epaphroditus, therefore that you may rejoice at seeing him again, and that I may be, you know what Paul says? Less anxious. It doesn't mean that we won't have these trials. But what if we learn the art of contentment, the secret to contentment? What if we learn to be content wherever we are? Because the promises of God never change. And the world sees Christians as content people. Can you imagine what witnesses we will be? Can you imagine if they don't see us as complaining about politics and complaining about how California is too expensive and this and that and that and this, and they see us as nevertheless content? What witnesses we will be to the world. They'll be like, what is it that makes you so content? What is it that you are living in? What causes you to have this peace? That's a free throw. That's gospel evangelism free throw. Well, thank you for asking. Can you imagine if we were content people, what witnesses we would be to the world? That's the power of thanksgiving. That's the power of having an attitude of gratitude. Now, there are 1,001 things we can be thankful for. I prepared to verse 6. I'm not going to go to verse 6. I'm going to stop before that, so it'll be shorter. But above all those things, we can be thankful, brothers and sisters, because you and I, you may be like, that's it, but you and I are perpetual partners, siblings, brothers, and sisters in the gospel. Let that sink in. Paul says, I think. I live, Paul says. with an attitude of gratitude. I've worked at it. Again, it's not just be thankful, be thankful, be thankful. Will it strong and be able. No, it's the fight of faith. To cling to God's promises. To live in that realm. To not view things simply from the realm of the earth, but to view things from and within the realm of the throne of God that we are seated on right now with Jesus. And he says, I thank God. And he does this in almost all his letters except Galatians. Because in Galatians, they ruin the gospel, and Paul says, forget thankfulness, I'm rebuking you. But in all of his other letters, even in Corinthians, he says, I'm thankful. As messed up as that church is. So I thank my God in all my recollection, in all my remembrance of you, the church. And again, Paul's saying this from within the prison cell, the prison walls. He had to learn the art of contentment. He had to be persecuted and rejected and betrayed and hurt. Remember when 1 Timothy, 2 Timothy says, when I was being tried, no one stood by me. So he said, I can't keep living in this discouragement and negativity. I got to learn the art of contentment. By faith, he fought the fight of faith to not judge his life by the circumstances. And I know that's hard. But we have access to the resources, remember, that God's given to us. I live by banking on God's promises. That's where my focus is on. And even if that means I need to say it to myself, talk to myself, repeat it to myself, speak to my heart, rebuke my heart, speak to my heart, whatever the case might be, I will do it. To not live that way is to my own hurt. And to hurt my life makes me a horrible witness to the watching world. And it makes me not an encouragement, not a source of edification to the church. It is a selfish way to live ultimately. Paul says, so I learned this. And so when I remember you, I'm thankful. Paul had to get desperate. We don't learn until we get desperate, right? Paul learned this. And he says, I do this always. At all times when I pray, every supplication. And that's one of the themes in the book of Philippians. Prayer, right? Not just praying long. No, there's no length. It is about what we pray for. It is about what's causing us to pray. And I pray for you. And I make my prayer, all my prayers with what? What? Joy. So it's not like Paul saying, I love being in prison. Like, man, this sucks. The food sucks, stinks, right? Dirty. I'm an apostle. What am I doing here, right? No, he's experiencing those things, but he has to intentionally, I'm repeating myself, fight the fight of faith to dwell on, focus on, and meditate on, and speak to his heart God's promises. And I have recourse to joy. Throughout the book of Philippians, Paul talks about joy. Verse 18, Paul says, what then? Only that in every way, whether in pretense or in truth, Christ is proclaimed, and in that I rejoice. This is crazy. Paul says some people preach the gospel because they want to outshine me. They want to show that they're doing better than I can. Some people preach the gospel out of good motives. Paul says, ultimately, as long as the gospel is preached. Oh my gosh. Paul will go on and on. Verse 25. Convinced of this, I know that I will remain and continue with you all for your progress and joy in the faith. This is right after Paul says, I'd rather die and go be with the Lord because that is better. But if it means I stay and minister to you, great, that's my source of joy. And I will lose out on being in heaven. Paul goes on and on and on about joy. Chapter 2, he says, verse 2, complete my joy. How? How will Paul the apostle be encouraged? He says, by being of the same mind, having the same love, being full accord and of one mind. Unity in the gospel is what brought Paul joy. The body functioning as a body is what brought Paul joy. Believers having the mind of Christ, that you are better than me. You have more needs than me. your encouragement is more important than my encouragement. If I need to slow down in my sanctification process so that you can catch up, then I will do that. And yet the irony is that is sanctification, right? That's what brought Paul joy. And he goes on and on and on and on about joy, joy. This guy, right, inch per inch, right, letter per letter, talks about joy more than, John Piper. That guy talks about joy. He'll preach on hell, and all of a sudden it's about joy, right? He'll preach on the Noah's Ark, and people dying in the flood is all about joy. All of a sudden, what happened here? I'm exaggerating, of course, but Paul is telling us, you and I have recourse to joy, just as he does. You know that song, when I think about the Lord, you know that song, how he raised me, how he, something lifted me up. You know that song? What? Yeah. You guys? Save me. I suppose. Save me. Right? When Paul thought about songs like that, Paul was deeply moved to thank God with joy for himself. Remember 1 Timothy? I thank God for considering me faithful. I thank God for saving me, this chief sinner. But you guys ever editorialize a love song to fit your current context or to fit the relationship you are in right now? You guys who are married, you're like, no, we don't do that anymore. I heard that Hyun used to do that when we were dating. I'm sorry. Just kidding. I never heard that, right? But you people do that, right? You hear a love song. You listen to Boyz II Men. You listen to All For One. And you listen, I don't know who, Modern Day Weekend, right? I don't know, right? And you editorialize it and you fill in like certain words with the person you like, right? You guys ever do that? I don't know. Don, you do that, right? Yeah, I don't know, right? Right? Robert, do you do that? You're too young for that? I don't know, right? People do that. Yes or no? Is it just me that? Of course you guys all do. I know Joe did it for sure, right? Paul did that with the Philippians. When I think about the Lord, how he raised me, how he saved me, how he raised me up, not just for me, but for the Philippians, he was deeply moved to thank God with joy for them. That is an example of seeing one another via faith with the lens of the gospel. The gospel does not see us through performance. The gospel sees us through promise. We are to put them lenses on every single day. Fight to put it on even if it's hard. You want to slap your husband? No, put it on. Okay? You guys don't want to slap your husbands, do you? Okay, that's wrong. We need to talk if you do, alright? You want to yell at your kids, and I need to work on this too. Put them on by faith. And see each other through the lens of the gospel. That is a source of joy. We can express this formally when we're together, informally when we're alone. We can do this with other believers. We can do this when we're alone by ourselves in the bathroom, in the car. It doesn't matter. I've been trying to practice this. I've been telling my wife, John, randomly, I'm thankful you're my wife. I'm thankful you're my wife. And she said, what are you doing? That's weird. Stop it. This is weird. Once in a while, I'll say to my wife, you're welcome. I'm your husband. And she just doesn't even respond to that. It's like Paul saying to them, you and I are partners in the gospel. We are one in the gospel. We are both sinners declared righteous. We are both sinners washed. If you go to Jesus right now, Jesus will look at you and say, you'll be like Peter, dang it, me, dirty, filthy, wash my whole body. And Jesus will say to you, you're already clean. We are partners in the gospel. We are partners in the gospel. We are brothers and sisters united together by faith. We are righteous together. We are cleansed together. Like Kathy Keller said, Tim Keller said, when we go to heaven, we'll look at our partners and say, I knew you'll make it. I knew you'll make it. Yes, I wanted to slap you that day, but I knew you'll make it, right? Why am I being so violent today? I don't know. And in turn, the Philippians are saying to Paul, man, we have a pact here. We are practically together. We're not just spiritually, but because we are spiritually partners in the gospel, we are practically together for the gospel. Right? Philippians 4. Look at what Paul says. Yet it was kind of you to share my trouble. And you Philippians yourselves know that in the beginning of the gospel, meaning when I began my ministry, when I left Macedonia, no church entered into partnership with me in giving and receiving. So nobody wanted to help me. Nobody wanted to support me. Nobody even wanted me to come. Except you only. And he goes on and he thanks them. Do you see that? That's doctrine in life. We are partners in the gospel. We are perpetual spiritual partners in the gospel. And so the Philippians looked at Paul and said, so we will practically be your partners in the gospel. And in turn, Paul says, so I thank God because of this very practical partnership we have. This togetherness. That word partnership there means fellowship. We fellowship when we support each other. When I minister to you, when you pray for me, when you minister to me and I support you, when you encourage me, when I lift you up, when you text me, when I call you, when you pray for me, when I think about whatever the case might be, we are fellowshipping. And this is fellowshipping in partnership, not over every single doctrinal issue. Some people in this world have to understand that. I had to learn this the hard way. We're not all here 5-point Calvinists, right? We're not all complementarians here. We're not all pre-mill. We can talk about these things. I would love to talk about these things. I love talking about theology. But the partnership here is what? Paul says, in the gospel. We are partners in the gospel. We are together for the euangelion, the good news. And Paul says, from the very first day until now. Until now, Paul says. And you notice that this is counter-circumstantial, counter-emotional reason, counter-prison, jail, unlikely, unfavorable situation, reason to exercise, by faith, apply this attitude of gratitude by considering, simply considering and counting and remembering and thinking about. You know that Sunday school song, count your blessings, name them one by one. Count your blessings, see what God hath done. You guys know that song? Count your blessings, name them one by one. Counting, remembering, recollecting our own gospel brothers and sisters, gospel family and friends, whom God graciously saved and graciously sent our way to become our partners, to evangelize us, and to equip, exhort, encourage, empower us, help us, and give us hope. Brothers and sisters, where would we be? What would we be? Who would we be if God did not save that particular individual, that person, or those group of people, and sent them to our way to share Christ with us? Where would we be? I'll tell you where I'll be. I'll be closer to hell than I was back then. That's what Paul's doing here. And I believe that we would do well. Count your blessings, name them one by one. You and I would do well to add to our own arsenal, our ammo for living in gratitude through faith as intentional forethought, not incidental afterthought, but intentional forethought, fighting the fight of faith, collecting gratitude. Collecting gratitude, like I collect my wish list on Amazon, right? Like I used to collect basketball cards, intentionally, actively. Even as we suffer, even as we grieve, living in gratitude. Again, you can't stop the birds from flying over our heads, We can stop negativity from coming at us. But we can stop it from building a nest over us or on our heads. Fighting to live with gratitude and thankfulness. Remember verse 1. Paul said to all the saints, brothers and sisters, there is a reason to be thankful. You are a saint. You are already 100% sanctified and holy in God's eyes. And he goes on and says, grace to you and peace from God. Shalom to you. That's God. That's how God comes at you. With grace, he's just giving grace. He's just wasting it. Wasting it. Quote, wasting it, okay? He's coming toward you with peace. Like Paul said, right? How beautiful are the feet of those who, what? Preach the good news. Think about your parents. Think about your friend. Think about that campus minister. Think about that partner. Think about that sister. Think about whoever preached the gospel to you, evangelized to you, won you over to Christ, prayed for you, led you to Jesus, was pleasing to you so that you might know Christ. We have that to be thankful for. On top of the 1,001 things, the 1,001 things you and I can be thankful for. We have food and clothing. With these we shall be content, right? And yet on top of that, we go to God, thank you for that gospel brother. Thank you for that gospel church. Thank you for that gospel sister, as imperfect as they and we are. Now, as I said earlier, my plan, I have another page, but I'm going to not go there, okay? Because you're like, our attention span is getting shorter. All things to all people. That's just my excuse to cut it here, but I want to take this opportunity, like heart to heart, man, just to say that I'm thankful for you guys. I wish everybody was here so they can hear it, so I could win some brownie points. I'm just kidding. I am thankful for our church. I really am. I'm thankful, of course, for my wife and my kids. Don't express it enough. They've never, ever stopped me from doing anything ministry related. Always supported me. But I'm also thankful for you guys, every single one of you. If I could look at every one of you, I would, but that would be really awkward, right? So I wish everybody was here. I'm thankful for each and every one of you. I called this audible this morning. I'm thankful for you. There are hundreds, thousands of churches in Orange County that you guys can go to. But for whatever reason you're here, now don't go, okay? Stay here, because otherwise I'm going to guilt trip you like crazy, right? There are churches with better programs, with better gifted elders and pastors, better preachers, better buildings, better this, better children's ministry, better everything, where the AC works constantly, where you can don't have to leave by 3:30, right? There are so many good churches out there, so many resources out there, but here you are, and you guys have supported me financially, and not just right now, but even in the past, and you guys supported me and the church prayerfully. Right? You guys are friends. I see you as friends, right? We're family. My wife and I were talking about this on the way here. We have family, like blood family, where there's a lot of drama. I said, I'd rather be with this family than with that family. I hope they never hear this, Paul says in Philippians chapter 1, I just wanted to jump off, use this passage as a springboard to just express my gratitude, and I'm going to end it here, but end it with that, Paul says, it is for me to live is Christ and to die is gain. He says, I am hard-pressed between the two, right? He said, if I go and be with Jesus, if I die now and go and be with, that's so much better. It's so much better. But if the Lord wants me to stay here, I will. And I will find new sources of joy. Ministering to you, growing in the gospel with you will be my source of joy. But Paul said, still, being with him is much better. And I say that because I'm not like Paul in that super godly sense, but Ain't no joke. For several years, I really, really thought about moving to Texas. I was like, that would be much better for me. Like Paul said, it's better for him to be with Christ. And it's not even for political reasons, it's for financial reasons. And not just for me and my family, but for my mom and my dad and my brother too, because they can live a better life. I want to go to Texas. Partly because my favorite basketball team. Shallow reason, isn't it? So shallow. I remember going on Zillow typing in San Antonio. I could live there. 110 degrees. I could live there. Right? But my wife and I were talking. I said, we can't leave Mercy Hill, Not because you need me, don't get me wrong, but because we're family. Right? We talked, I said, we can't leave them. I'd be crazy to leave them. I'd pick Mercy Hill over San Antonio Spurs any day. That's a lot. It is better for me to be in Texas, but I'm here, right? And thankfully, by the grace of God, I said we are much more financially stable than ever before. Thank God for that. But man, I'm just so thankful for our church. You guys are my gospel partners. You guys are my gospel brothers and sisters. And I don't know if you guys know this. Pastors won't share this, a secret. I don't just learn the gospel by preparing sermons and preaching and teaching and ministering to you. I also learn the gospel when you talk. Did you know that? When you share, when you talk about your struggles, your needs, your need for God, when I see you wrestling with the gospel, when you're crying, right? When you're praying, when you're fellowshipping, when you're being real and transparent, when you're being a real human being, I learned the gospel. You guys don't know that, do you? Meaning you minister to me with the gospel in ways that you don't even realize. You guys are my gospel partners. Again, I hate to say my as if I'm the lead. I'm not the lead. Our goal is to have a plurality of elders. You know that, right? You know that. I don't want to be the sole guy here. But I just want to jump off this passage, springboard off this passage, and just say from the bottom of my heart that I am genuinely thankful for each and every one of you, and even the ones who are not here. But don't tell them I said that. Okay, just kidding.